Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're kicking things off with a really profound line from Tupac Shakur's The Rose That Grew from Concrete.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air.
Wow. That's such a powerful image, isn't it?
It really is.
That idea of defying, what seems possible, growing where you're not supposed to. And that's really what we're getting into today, this whole fascinating, sometimes hidden idea of potential.
Exactly. Our mission really is to dig into some sources that challenge our usual thinking about talent, about success. We're hoping to uncover some pretty surprising insights into how basically anyone can achieve more, regardless of where they start.
Right.
And to kind of set the scene, let's jump back to 1991. The National Junior High Chess Championships.
Okay. In this tournament, typically, it was all the elite schools, right? Like Dalton, places with serious resources, chess programs.
Yeah, the established players, the expected winners.
Exactly.
But then this young chess master, Maurice Ashley, a Jamaican immigrant, he shows up with a pretty radical idea.
Okay.
He wasn't just about winning. He wanted to shatter stereotypes. He wanted to prove that kids from, underserved communities were just as brilliant. He was looking, like Tupac said, to grow roses in concrete.
So he wasn't picking prodigies.
No, not at all. He decided to coach a team from Harlem. And these kids, they were mostly B students. One was apparently the class bully. They weren't chosen for some innate chess genius.
So what was it then?
Motivation. Sheer motivation. That's what Maurice was looking for.
And this team, the Raging Rooks, what happened?
Well, what's incredible is they went on to win the whole championship.
Wow. Seriously. Against those elite schools.
Seriously. So if it wasn't raw talent, if it wasn't like pure brain power, what was it?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the aha moment.
Yeah.
It suggests potential isn't just about your starting blocks. It's about how far you travel, the distance covered.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's the core idea for today's deep dive.
Absolutely.
And if we want to understand that journey, that distance traveled, we really need to start with something foundational: skills of character.
Character.
Yeah.
We usually think of that as, fixed principles.
Yeah.
Maybe personality.
Right, exactly. We think it's just who you are. But the sources we looked at, they argue something different. They say character is actually a set of, learnable skills, things you can practice and get better at.
Learnable skills.
Huh.
Okay, that definitely challenges the old way of thinking. What's the evidence for that? That character isn't just set in stone.
Well, there's this really fascinating study. It involved 1,500 entrepreneurs in West Africa. They were in their 30s, 40s, 50s.
Okay.
Some got training in standard cognitive skills, business stuff. Others got training specifically in character skills.
And the results.
The character skills training, it had a huge lasting impact on their businesses, significantly more than the cognitive training alone. It just blows up that old idea from William James, the founder of psychology.
The one about character being set like plaster.
Yeah, set like plaster by age 30. This study pretty much shows that's wrong. Character can change. It can be developed much later in life.
That's a really big deal. And it reminds me, didn't the military used to call these soft skills? Which always sounded a bit dismissive.
They did. They contrasted them with hard skills like, operating machinery. But thankfully, they dropped that term because soft makes them sound weak or optional.
Right.
But actually, these character skills, being proactive, pro-social, disciplined, determine these are the things that machines can't do. In a world with more automation, these are becoming the really hard skills, the crucial ones.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's dig into the first key character skill from the sources. Embracing discomfort.
Right. This is a big one. Think about people like Sarah Maria or Benny Lewis. They're polyglots. They speak tons of languages.
Yeah, amazing.
But what's surprising is both of them were actually pretty bad at languages in school. They really struggled, even as adults.
So what changed? Did they suddenly find a hidden talent?
Not really. Their breakthrough wasn't finding some language gene. It was learning to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. That awkwardness of trying to speak, making mistakes.
Okay, so leaning into the difficulty.
Exactly. And this really flies in the face of that popular idea about learning styles. Right?
Oh, yeah, the visual learner, auditory learner thing.
That whole thing. Loads of research has looked into it. And there's basically no good evidence that matching teaching to a preferred style actually helps people learn better.
Huh, really?
Yeah. In fact, sometimes forcing yourself to learn in a way that feels less comfortable, that challenges your preference, that can actually speed up learning.
So the struggle is actually productive.
It can be, yeah. Think about Steve Martin.
The comedian.
Actor? Yeah.
Yeah.
He said he hated writing, found it incredibly hard, didn't feel natural at all.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Right. But he pushed through that discomfort, learned to write jokes, and that struggle, that skill he forced himself to learn, basically launched his entire acting career.
Wow, okay. So pushing past what feels easy.
It takes courage, though. The sources talk about three kinds. First, courage to ditch the methods you already know, the ones that feel safe.
Okay.
Second, courage to just jump in, put yourself out there before you feel totally ready.
Like speaking a language before you're fluent.
Exactly. And third, maybe the most counterintuitive, courage to make more mistakes than other people are even attempting.
Make more mistakes. That sounds wrong.
It does, but think about it. Benny Lewis, the polyglot, he realized that making mistakes early on actually helped cement the correct information later. It's like the mistake highlights the right answer in your brain. Mistakes aren't failures, they're just data, fuel.
Fuel for learning. I like that. Okay, so embrace discomfort. What's the next character skill?
It's about how we take in information, especially feedback. It's called becoming a sponge.
A sponge, okay.
Think of Melody Hobson. Grew up really poor, lights getting cut off, car repossessed, that kind of thing. But she developed this incredible ability to be an active seeker of feedback. She described herself as a human sponge for knowledge, just soaking everything up.
That's a powerful image. How does that connect more broadly?
Well, historically, look at the Protestant Reformation. We often think about the work ethic it inspired.
Sure, the Weber thesis.
Right. But another huge factor was literacy. Martin Luther wanted everyone to read the Bible themselves. So suddenly, huge numbers of people had to learn to read.
Ah, so literacy itself was the key.
It was a massive key. Once people could read scripture, they could read everything else too. Manuals, news, ideas. Society became this giant sponge, absorbing information much faster, which fueled economic growth alongside the work ethic.
That makes sense. So how does one become a sponge, practically speaking? The sort is contrasted with other approaches.
Yeah, they talk about two unhelpful extremes. One is being like clay. You're reactive, you can be molded, you might have a growth mindset, but you're sort of passive, waiting for others to shape you.
Okay, dependent.
Right. The other extreme is Teflon. You're proactive, maybe driven, but your ego deflects any negative feedback. Nothing sticks.
Doesn't want to hear criticism.
Exactly. The sponge approach is different. It's proactive and growth-oriented. You actively go looking for diverse information, different perspectives, even the stuff that might sting a little.
Because you know it'll help you grow.
Precisely. You absorb it, filter it, make it your own.
Is there a good example of this?
Julius Yago, the Kenyan javelin thrower. Amazing story. He's not physically imposing compared to his competitors. He's 5'9", 187 pounds. Not a freak of nature.
Yeah.
But he became a freak of nature. He couldn't get coaching in Kenya, so he taught himself by watching YouTube videos of the world's best throwers.
Seriously, YouTube?
Yep. He watched obsessively, analyzed their techniques, absorbed what worked, ignored what didn't fit him, and basically created his own unique style.
Mm-hmm.
He even developed this technique where he'd sometimes fall face first after a throw like he was doing the worm. Yes. But it worked for him. He became a world champion. He actively sought out the information, filtered it, and applied it relentlessly. Total sponge.
That's incredible. Falling like the worm for a world championship. That really grabs a hook. So embrace discomfort. Be a sponge.
Yeah.
What's the third character skill?
Becoming an imperfectionist.
Imperfectionist. That sounds wrong, especially if you're aiming high. Think of an architect designing earthquake-proof buildings. Tadao Ando.
Mm-hmm.
Surely he's aiming for perfection.
You'd think so, right? And it's easy to fall into that trap. I actually saw this in my own diving career. My mom, meaning well, used to say if I didn't get an A, she knew I hadn't done my best.
Oh, wow. Pressure.
Yeah, and it kind of fueled this unhealthy perfectionism in my diving. But chasing perfection, that absolute flawlessness, it can actually paralyze you. It creates this intense fear of making any mistake at all.
Tunnel vision.
Totally. Now, Ando, who was also a former boxer before becoming a self-taught architect, he got this. In boxing, you will get hit. You can't be flawless. You learn to accept, even plan for, certain kinds of imperfections.
Okay, I see.
And his famous concrete buildings, they often have visible seams, bolt holes that aren't perfectly filled. They're imperfect, but they are meticulously smooth to the touch. They are perfectly acceptable, as he put it. It's a deliberate choice about which imperfections matter.
Perfectly acceptable, not perfect. That's a key distinction.
It is. And in diving, same thing. A score of 10 means excellence, not literal perfection. My coach, Eric Best, he really drove this home. At the end of practice, he'd ask, "Did you make yourself better today? Did you make someone else better today?"
That's the benchmark.
Yeah. If you could say yes to either, it was a good day. It shifts the focus from some impossible ideal to actual daily progress. And using what the sources call mental time travel, looking back at how far you've come, that really helps appreciate the progress over chasing perfection.
That makes sense. Does this apply outside of sports or architecture, like in creative work?
Absolutely. Look at Twyla Tharp developing her dance musical, Moving Out. Early on, people called it a strenuous, chaotic mess. Right. So to fix it, she didn't aim for instant perfection. She used what you might call a minimum lovable product approach, and she relied on a small judging committee.
What's that?
A few trusted people whose feedback she gathered independently. She looked for where their criticisms converged. Those were the imperfections she needed to fix. The goal wasn't zero flaws. It was knowing which flaws to address and which were acceptable, maybe even interesting.
So strategic imperfectionism.
Exactly. And ultimately, the sources say you have to be your own last judge. You prioritize your own sense of accomplishment, your own pride in the work, rather than trying to please absolutely everyone, because, let's face it, that's impossible anyway.
Right. You drive yourself crazy. Okay, that's a really helpful frame. Character skills as learnable. Now, let's shift gears to the second major theme, setting up scaffolding. What do we mean by scaffolding here?
Think of it like literal scaffolding on a building. It's temporary, targeted support. It doesn't build the building for you, but it gives you a foothold, a boost, maybe helps you bridge a gap you couldn't cross on your own.
Okay, temporary support, like what?
Well, a simple example is the Tetris effect. Playing Tetris has actually been shown to help reduce intrusive thoughts, like after a traumatic event.
Really?
And seems to activate the visual spatial parts of your brain so strongly that there's just less mental bandwidth available for those intrusive images to pop up. It's a specific tool, a temporary support for a specific problem.
Huh. Okay. So what kind of scaffolding helps unlock potential?
One really powerful type is turning practice into play.
Practice into play. How does that work?
Take Evelyn Glennie. She's this amazing solo percussionist, profoundly deaf since childhood, won multiple Grammys, knighted by the Queen.
Incredible. And deaf. How?
She learned to feel vibrations. But the point here is, when she first went to the Royal Academy of Music, they dieted her. But she achieved mastery not through grim, joyless suffering. She and her teacher found ways to turn the daily grind into a source of daily joy. They made practice engaging, playful.
That sounds much better than the stories you hear about, say, Mozart's childhood.
Exactly. His father apparently subjected him to unconditional slavery of practice, total drudgery, leading to exhaustion. And modern research backs this up. People who are just obsessively grinding, putting in crazy hours without enjoyment, they often don't perform any better than peers who have more balance. And they're way more likely to experience bore out.
Bore out? Like burnout?
Similar, but it's more about emotional deadening, feeling numb and disengaged from the work. And then there's actual burnout, the total emotional exhaustion. Turning practice into play helps avoid both.
So how do you do that? What are the key ideas?
The sources talk about harmonious passion, loving what you do in a balanced way, and deliberate play.
Deliberate play.
Yeah, it's not just messing around. It's structured activity that blends fun and challenge with serious skill development. It keeps things interesting, preventing that bore out and burnout.
Got an example.
Brandon Payne, who trains Steph Curry. Curry himself says he wasn't a natural athlete.
Right, he wasn't the highest rated prospect.
Not at all. But Payne's core philosophy was, there is no boring in our workouts. He designed these deliberate play drills, creating game-like scenarios, adding pressure, making the hardest work feel like an engaging challenge.
So it's still hard work, but it's fun hard work.
Exactly. It taps into intrinsic motivation. And this approach helps people improve significantly, even if they start out with relatively low skills. The struggle becomes part of the enjoyment.
That makes sense. Is there anything else to making practice sustainable?
Yes, absolutely. Proactive rest and recovery. It's not laziness, it's strategic.
Strategic rest.
Yeah, taking breaks, stepping away, even taking proper vacations. It sustains that harmonious passion. It can unlock fresh ideas. And Lin-Manuel Miranda apparently getting the idea for Hamilton while on vacation.
Ah, okay. So rest isn't stopping progress, it's enabling it.
And it helps consolidate learning, too. Your brain processes things when you rest. It's crucial scaffolding.
Okay, turn practice into play. Incorporate rest. What's another type of scaffolding?
Taking the roundabout path to progress.
Roundabout path. Sounds inefficient.
It can feel that way. We like to think progress is a straight line, always moving forward. But sometimes you hit a wall, and the best way forward is actually to back up first or go sideways.
Back up to move forward.
Okay.
Tell me more.
The story of R.A. Dickey, the baseball pitcher, is just perfect here.
Oh, yeah, the knuckleballer.
A knuckleballer. But before that, he spent 14 years stuck in the minor leagues. He was selling golf balls he fished out of ponds with alligators just to make ends meet.
Wow, that's rough.
Totally. At age 31, they basically told him his career was over. Done. But then, at 35, he completely pivots. He masters the knuckleball, this incredibly difficult, unpredictable pitch.
The one that confuses even the catchers sometimes.
That's the one. It was a total detour, full of frustration, probably felt like steps backward initially. But that roundabout path, it led him to become one of the best pitchers in baseball, winning the Cy Young Award, getting a huge contract.
Incredible story. So the detour was the way forward.
It was. And this connects to that feeling of languishing that many people experience. Feeling stuck, aimless emotionally.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know that feeling.
Well, the sources suggest that taking strategic detours, maybe a side project, a new hobby, something totally different from your main path, can be really helpful. It provides small wins, builds momentum, reminds you that progress is possible even if it's not on the road you originally planned.
So loops and detours aren't failures, they're part of the process.
Exactly. As one source puts it, in the long run, loops lead to the highest peaks. It's not always linear.
Loops lead to the highest piece. I like that. Okay, final piece of scaffolding.
Flying by your own bootstraps, but maybe not in the way we usually think of it. It's about finding inner strength, often through connection with others.
Okay, how so?
The story here is incredibly powerful. It's about the Golden 13.
The first Black Navy officers in the U.S.
That's them. Trained during World War II, facing just immense prejudice. The system was designed for them to fail. Low expectations, hostility.
A huge burden.
Massive. Their training period was even cut in half compared to white officer candidates. But they were absolutely determined, not just to pass, but to excel. They knew they were carrying the weight of future generations.
And they did excel.
Amazingly so. All 16 who started didn't just pass, they got the highest academic marks in Navy history up to that point. They understood that if one made it, they all made it. It was collective.
So how did they support each other? What was the scaffolding?
A key thing was the tutor effect. We know this now. The best way to really learn something deeply is to teach it to someone else.
Right, explaining it forces you to understand it better.
Exactly. The Golden 13 constantly taught each other Navy regulations, navigation, everything. Even if you weren't an expert, the act of teaching solidified the knowledge for everyone involved.
Okay, the tutor effect. What else?
There's also the coach effect. This is interesting. Encouraging someone else to overcome an obstacle actually boosts your own confidence and motivation. It reminds you of your own capabilities.
Helping others helps yourself.
Yeah. And then there's using doubt as fuel. Allison Levine, the mountaineer, talked about climbing Everest. A guy shouted at her, "You're never going to make it at this pace."
That's harsh.
Totally. But she used it. She called it fuel from ignorant naysayers. When someone doubts you, especially someone who doesn't really know, it can ignite this desire to prove them wrong.
Right, you want to make them eat their words.
Exactly. And finally, there's the partner effect. Just working closely with others towards a shared difficult goal like Olympic synchronized divers that inherently boosts determination. When people are counting on you, when you're part of a team.
You dig deeper.
You find reserves you didn't know you had. The Golden 13 absolutely found that resolve because they weren't just doing it for themselves. They were blazing a trail, opening doors for countless others, fighting for broader civil rights. Their bootstraps were woven together.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. Okay, so we've covered character skills and scaffolding. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
It's moving beyond the individual. It's about the larger systems of opportunity.
Systems of opportunity, meaning what?
Meaning that character and scaffolding, while crucial, often aren't enough on their own. The environment, the structures, the societal systems around us play a huge role in whether potential gets unlocked or stays hidden.
Okay. Is there evidence for this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Look at the work of economist Raj Chetty. His research is stunning. It shows how much your wealth and where you grow up impact your chances of becoming an inventor, for example.
How big is the impact?
Huge. Kids raised in families in the top 1% income bracket are 10 times more likely to become inventors than kids from families below the median income. 10 times.
Wow. That clearly shows opportunity isn't evenly spread.
Not at all. It's often concentrated. Which leads us to look at systems that try to distribute it more evenly, like Finland's education system.
Right, they're always ranked near the top globally.
Yeah.
What do they do differently?
Well, their core philosophy is different. They don't focus just on finding and pushing the best and brightest. They genuinely seem to believe in the potential of all students.
Yeah.
And the result? They have some of the smallest achievement gaps between high and low performers anywhere in the world.
So how do they achieve that? What are the practices?
Several things stand out. Teachers have a lot of autonomy. There's huge emphasis on individualized support. Like one principal who personally spent time helping an immigrant student, Basart, learn Finnish so he could succeed.
That's real commitment.
It is. And they focus heavily on play, especially in kindergarten, rather than drilling academics early on. They believe learning should be intrinsically motivating, it should be fun.
Interesting. So well-being performance aren't seen as opposites.
Exactly. They see it as a false choice. They foster well-being to support performance, like letting kids choose their own books to read that builds intrinsic motivation, a love of reading, which pays off far more than forcing everyone through the same assigned texts.
A system designed to lift everyone. Okay. What's another example of a system unlocking potential?
Let's shift to a crisis situation. The Chilean mine collapse in 2010. Remember that? 33 miners trapped underground.
Vaguely, yeah. Dramatic rescue.
Incredibly dramatic. And the rescue itself provides amazing insights into systems. The team leader, Andre Sugaret, wasn't just picked for his technical mining expertise.
No? What else?
He was chosen for his pro-social skills. He was an exceptional listener. He knew he didn't have all the answers, and his goal was to build a system to unearth collective intelligence, not just rely on the usual experts.
So tapping into everyone's ideas.
Precisely. Instead of traditional brainstorming, which can often be dominated by the loudest voices.
Right, or the highest ranking person.
Yeah, they use techniques like brainwriting. People generate ideas individually first, on paper, before group discussion. Then ideas are evaluated more systematically.
And did that lead to better solutions?
Absolutely. It surfaced crucial innovations, like they needed communication, right? Someone came up with using a cheap $10 plastic phone modified to fit down the borehole. That became their lifeline. Or when a drill bit broke deep underground.
Big problem.
Huge problem. An engineer named Igor, using brainwriting, sketched this idea like a carnival claw machine to retrieve the broken piece. It worked. These weren't necessarily ideas that would have emerged in a typical top-down expert meeting.
Wow. Collective intelligence in action. Are there examples in, like, companies?
Definitely. Look at W.L. Gore, the company that makes Gore-Tex. They don't have a rigid corporate ladder. They have a lattice system.
Lattice, like a garden trellis.
Kind of, yeah. It means there are multiple paths to leadership. It's much more flexible. And critically, they encourage dabble time, allowing employees to work on unproven passion projects.
So you don't need layers of approval.
Not in the same way. Take Elixir guitar strings, a huge product for them now. The engineer who invented them, Dave Myers, initially got told no by some leaders. But in a lattice system, he just needed one sponsor, one leader to champion the idea. That flexibility allowed a potentially overlooked innovation to thrive.
A system designed to let unconventional ideas surface.
Okay.
Last area. Finding potential where systems usually miss it, like in hiring or admissions.
Right. How do we find those diamonds in the rough? The story of Jose Hernandez is just incredible here.
The astronaut.
The astronaut who started as a migrant farm worker. He applied to NASA's astronaut program and got rejected 11 times over 15 years. 11 times.
That's persistence. Why do they keep rejecting him?
Well, NASA's traditional process focused heavily on past performance and standard credentials, college pedigree, flight hours, things like that.
Okay, the usual metrics.
Right. And those metrics completely missed Hernandez's distance traveled. They didn't adequately weigh his incredible background, the skills he taught himself, the immense character and resilience it took to even get to the point of applying.
They were looking at the resume, not the journey.
Exactly. And the sources really challenged those traditional metrics. Prior work experience, often not that predictive of future success. Elite universities, maybe a slight edge, but not nearly as much as people think.
So what should we look at?
One really interesting idea is grade point trajectory, or GPT. Not just the final GPA, but the rate of improvement over time.
Ah, so someone who struggled early but then figured it out and soared.
Precisely. The insight is powerful. Early failure followed by later success is a mark of hidden potential. It shows grit, learning, adaptability.
That makes a lot of sense.
Uh,
Are there places actually putting these ideas into practice, like in job interviews?
yes. Call Yakul, a call center in Israel staffed entirely by people with disabilities. They completely reimagine interviews.
Oh, so.
They design the process to reduce stress. They focus on discovering passions and strengths, not just probing for weaknesses. They use work sample tests, but crucially, they allow for second chances within the tests.
Second chances.
Yeah. And get this, they even offer candidates a do-over for the whole interview if the candidate feels they didn't perform their best the first time.
A do-over. That's amazing.
Isn't it? It's a system designed to let everyone's true skills shine through, not just reward people who are good at performing under typical high-pressure interview conditions. It's built to find potential, not screen it out.
That's a fundamentally different approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping all this up, what's the big takeaway for us, for the listener?
I think the biggest thing is that hidden potential truly is everywhere. It's in communities, it's in individuals, maybe even in ourselves where we least expect it.
And unlocking it isn't magic. It involves these concrete things we talked about.
Right. Cultivating those character skills, embracing discomfort, being a sponge, becoming an imperfectionist, building supportive scaffolding, turning practice into play, taking roundabout paths, finding strength together.
And crucially, building and advocating for more equitable systems in education, in work, in our communities. Systems that actually open doors and windows for everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah, and these ideas, they aren't just abstract. You can apply them in your own life, right? Your personal growth, how you approach challenges at work.
And also how you see and support potential in others, your kids, your colleagues, people in your neighborhood.
Exactly. It changes how you look at people, maybe focusing more on their trajectory, their distance traveled, than just their starting point or current position.
So maybe a final thought to leave people with. If, as Tupac suggested, the achievement is really in the growing, in that rose pushing through concrete, what rose from concrete are you maybe nurturing right now in yourself or someone else?
Yeah, and what's maybe one small, maybe even uncomfortable step you could take today after hearing all this to help it bloom?